So, Joe, what do you think about the perspective that countries like Russia, China, Iran, and some would say even Turkey could provide a counterweight and an alternative to the US-led imperialist powers?
You can say there's two basic perspectives in how imperialism is going to be fought or opposed. One is that the counterweight to imperialism is various national governments or a consortia of national governments, as in the BRICS Summit Declaration, that somehow through the counterweight of other countries, a peaceful, equitable, just, democratic world order is going to be created. And tied to this conception is that the appetites of American imperialism will be curtailed. And somehow we will create a capitalist society in which the capitalist powers equitably exploit the resources of the world and equitably exploit the international working class without conflict and war. The second perspective, our perspective, is the perspective that the opposition to imperialism must be developed as a political movement for world socialist revolution, rooted in the working class, which is an international class, opposing through such a movement the nation-state system itself and replacing the archaic capitalist nation-state system with world socialist economy and global planning. That is the necessary and realistic perspective. In relationship to multipolarity, I would make a couple points. First of all, it is contrary to the nature of imperialism. As Lenin explained so long ago, imperialism is not just a policy. It arises out of the nature of capitalist society, the competition of great powers over access to raw materials, resources, what is involved in the escalating war in the Middle East, the genocide in Gaza, which is part of that, control over oil. The United States, American imperialism has been waging war in the Middle East for decades. Control over the resources of the Middle East, which is bound up with competition with Russia, with China, and there, the war against Russia and Ukraine. What is that about? Access to resources in Russia. Opening up of China eventually. I mean, China is a center of semiconductor production. Control over rare earths necessary for the production of commodities, cell phones, computers, also military equipment. These are social interests driving war. Imperialist war is an expression fundamentally of the conflict, the contradiction between a global economy, which we live in, and a nation-state system through which competing sections of the capitalist class fight out for access to resources and the exploitation of the working class. The idea that American imperialism is going to peacefully accept a diminution of its position on a world scale. Well, we know they will not, they cannot. In fact, the utilization of military force to conquer the world is now essential to the interests of the American ruling class, the countering of the threat to the dollar. The same issue of foreign affairs that David cited, there's an essay by Anthony Blinken, Secretary of State responsible for the genocide in Gaza, who says he refers specifically to the threat to the dollar posed by different consortia of countries. And that has to be opposed. I mean, they are preparing for world war. They've got a $1.8 trillion nuclear rearmament program. They're spending something on the order of $100,000 a minute to rearm their nuclear weapons, the American ruling class. They're not just doing that for the threat. I mean, they are preparing. And there has been 3 decades of unending war by American imperialism, and that is now transforming into the conflict with Russia and China. The idea of sort of American imperialism accepting a diminished position is utopian. And the final point I would make is that all these countries are themselves capitalist governments. They exploit their own working class. They are not independent from imperialism. I mean, Iran, and they're always trying to, Russia as well, trying to seek some sort of agreement with imperialism, some sort of accommodation. Lula in Brazil, who's a leading proponent, I mean, he combines, or for that matter, Erdogan in Turkey, limited criticism of the genocide in Gaza. Turkey, of course, is a member of NATO. Lula in Brazil makes continuous appeals to American imperialism. They represent the interests of the capitalist class, and they're not independent from imperialism. The basic issue, though, is one of perspective. How is imperialism going to be opposed? Trotsky put it very succinctly. We follow not the map of war, but the map of the class struggle. That is, we do not base ourselves on the positions of one or another capitalist nation state. We oppose all of them. We don't base ourselves on the policy of the Putin government in Russia or Erdogan in Turkey or Lula in Brazil, Modi in India, reactionary fascist, but on the independent interests of the working class throughout the world. That is the force that will oppose and can oppose imperialism, because it's in its objective interests to oppose imperialism, capitalism, of which imperialism is an expression, the highest stage. It is not separate from that. You can't oppose imperialism without opposing capitalism. And so I think it's a basic question of perspective, which we've been discussing today. What is the social force? And we insist, and as Dave was stressing, the revolutionary force is the working class. The working class is a social force that must be mobilized against imperialism, and can be, and will be, and is what we're fighting for. It is a powerful objective force. It produces everything. It is united in the process of production all over the world. The international working class has to become conscious of its aims and led with a political perspective and a political party.